Tonight, we have Villemeur from L'Oréal, we have Sharone from Contentsquare, we have Leo from Servier, and Paul-Louis from Algolia. And so we're going to talk about how to successfully drive a machine learning project. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves quickly, saying what you do, where you work, and I'm going to ask you to answer one question. What is for you the main difference between a project that includes AI and a project that doesn't include AI?
Thank you very much, Annabelle. Thank you very much, Ekimetrics, for hosting this meetup in Paris, in the center of Paris. So I'm Victor, I'm a product manager at L'Oréal, and basically what I do as a product manager is building products that are based on AI and machine learning and Databricks in order to help L'Oréal employees to be more efficient, to focus on more value-added tasks. So the question you asked me, so that was the short part and easy part. So the question you asked about what's the main difference, I'm going to say that the first thing that popped into my mind, which is change management, user change management, and to say it very briefly, the fact that you can either have very skeptical users that struggle to trust the results of machine learning algorithms, and so that are really reluctant to use the product, and you also have very enthusiastic, over-enthusiastic users that are going to lose every critical sense, lose their mind because they trust too much data science products, machine learning algorithms.
This is definitely a topic that we're going to talk more about in a minute. Thank you, Victor. Sharone?
Hi, thank you so much for having us. So I'm Sharone, I work at Contentsquare. I'm a machine learning engineer there, and I try to model intentions. And to answer your question, for me the biggest difference between an AI project and another project is the uncertainty. When you start with an AI project, you never know if the solution that you're going to find is going to answer the need, is going to be efficient, and is going to be precise enough to be available for every client. So that would be
Definitely. It's going to be the first topic, actually.
Hello everyone, so I'm Leo. I'm working at Servier as a senior data scientist for 2 years now. For the quick note, I worked at Ekimetrics before, and so I said, yeah. And so just what I'm doing at Servier, I'm working right now about how to measure, how to optimize the engagement of the healthcare practitioner with the brand, with a product, and how to engage them in a way that we can create engagement, confidence, and so to promote our product and drugs. And about your question, I completely agree with both of you, and I will add one thing. For me, a classical project, you know how to finish that project. You know what you want to aim, what's your target, and at the opposite, machine learning and AI project, because machine learning is based on probability, and it's impossible, quite hard to say, okay, to succeed in that task, it would take 5 months, it would take 5 months, 6 months, 5 people, and that, for me, the main difference between the two, but to measure the time to finish the task.
Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Nech, working at Algolia. I don't have much to add to this because uncertainty is to me the main thing. But maybe first what I do at Algolia, I've been working here for 6 years, first doing mobile development. Since the last 4 years I've been focusing on machine learning, natural language processing, conversational agents, now working on recommender models, finding right products for you based on what you look at. And to me the main points about machine learning projects that make them different from regular engineering would be the uncertainty. The fact that when you start, it is science. You don't know if what you find is going to work out. You don't know if your hypothesis is going to be conclusive or not. So uncertainty, but because now I have to add something else. I would say also the instability. We're in a field that moves so fast that the state of the art changes sometimes on a monthly basis, and this makes it sometimes a challenge to be sure of that what you're doing has value. I'm thinking of all the teams doing natural language processing, getting a bit scared about GPT and language models right now and thinking, is the work I did for the last 6 months actually going to get replaced by an AI? That's a real challenge, managing uncertainty, but also keeping the eyes open on everything else happening.
Yes, absolutely. It's always hard to be the last one to answer this kind of question, so well done. So we're going to start with this uncertainty exploratory aspect of AI. I wanted to ask you, Leo, how do you limit the risks that are linked to this exploratory aspect?
Quite difficult question to start. To answer this question, I will advise 2 points. To limit the risk, with my experience, to limit the maximum the risk at the beginning is to engage your sponsor, your user, your key stakeholder at the very first beginning of the project or the product.
Yes,
Different, but and by engaging them as soon as possible, you will create kind of a trust contract between them and between you by defining what are their needs, not their expectations, their needs. You will define kind of a metric to follow the improvement curve weeks after weeks about your model, about your product, and also you will be able in that contract to define a baseline to reach to say, okay, my project is at minimal viable state to say, okay, we have succeeded in improving something in my user daily life. So that's the first point, to engage as soon as possible.
Engage, have a baseline, and try to improve it.
Exactly, and define that contract between you and them. And as soon as this contract has been defined, decided, try fast. I don't remember exactly the expression, but it's fail fast and learn faster. And so, for me, a good solution and a good way to limit the risk is to apply some agile principle. I mean, I don't know if everybody knows Scrum, but by using, I think most of you know Scrum, but maybe not online, I don't know. But by applying sprints, by, for example, 2 weeks, you will be able to test and also to constrain in time your exploratory phases. Saying, I have only 2 weeks to deal with that task. I have to test and define a very small task, some small target to reach, and not define a big target you won't be able to reach anyway. So apply agile, test fast, and fail fast, and also don't hesitate to apply very simple algorithm. I don't know, maybe rule-based algorithm, regex, isNS at the very beginning of the project, in order to reach as soon as possible the baseline you have defined at the beginning, and so that you will have time to improve, to add data, to test new model, to transform data, etc., to keep your model improving day after day. So yes, that's my 2 points just to sum up. Engage your people, define a contract, and apply agile, Scrum, and fail fast. That will limit the risk.
Yeah, so start simple as well, and maybe not always with machine learning straight away.
Exactly, yes.
Something else. Yeah. Thank you. So Sharone, you put models in production, because it's one thing to do the exploratory phase, but when do you choose to put things in production, and how do you do it at Contentsquare?
So I'll start first by saying that at Contentsquare, we estimate that the life cycle of a machine learning project has 6 steps. So you start by scoping and doing some research on your subject. Is there a need? Is there a project need here? Does the literature goes and give you some hints that potentially you will find in machine learning an answer to this problem? Then there is the exploratory data analysis phase. Why not? So as I said, exploratory data analysis phase, which is make sure that you have all the data sources needed. Make sure that you know the data, you know the limitation of your data, and remove the correlation, remove the biases that you could encounter. Then there is the first block. So you want to start small and you want to start quick. So you want to prove the value. If it's a product, you put it and you release it in beta for 1 client, 2 clients, X clients. You just see the usage, you see their adoption. And if you have a go from the project, from the clients, from all the stakeholders, then yes, you can think about systematic experimentation. How do you make sure that your model can indeed generalize to all the clients, to all the modules, to a bigger time frame, to a larger set of data? And after that, then there is the full industrialization pipeline, which is, okay, you put all the data engineers in the loop, the app, the platformers, and all the, basically the stages. So I would say here that if you are able to stick to those milestones, first you make sure that you're not building something that will not be used. Then you make sure that there is a clear value for the client, and you iterate over the solution. You have time. For each milestone, you have time to build, like the V1 is in POC, you're already building the V2 that will be the one industrialized, or the V3 or the V4. And trying to basically exactly say what are the tasks in each of those milestones. So for exploratory data analysis, there is the correlation part. It should take about 2 weeks. There is the data extraction part. It should take about 3 weeks. And if you stick to it, then you remove the uncertainty, you leave time, and you make sure that your project is successful.
Yeah, that's what you were saying, Leo, with cutting things into small pieces and sprints. And so just quick second questions. Do you have your data scientists that are in a team that is separate from the ML engineer or MLOps people?
No, so what we call data science at Contentsquare is data scientists, transversal, tech leads with MLOps, everything related to project expertise also, everything related to machine learning researcher, which is making sure that you're up to date with the literature. This is one function that is under the data science scope, and we're not exactly agile in the sense that we do not work in sprints, but we do make sure that each of our tasks that is well documented with all the stakeholders has an end date.
Victor, L'Oréal is a bit bigger. Do you have, in terms of organization, same? Do you have different teams with different scopes? Do you apply agile? Tell us a bit more about how you work at L'Oréal.
Yeah, I think that's pretty similar to what you said, but maybe it's less formalized, and we don't have this kind of 6 steps that are really showcased about. But yeah, we try to apply this same kind of logic, which is actually to say that a machine learning product remains a product initially. So you have to apply the same principles, which is, as you say, very well, deliver value fast, and try not to build something that nobody wants to use. Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite a similar way of functioning. So a point I would like to raise there is that, yeah, I think I'm a really big believer into this kind of agile ways of working and product management. I do think that there are some times where they are kind of failing on some machine learning products, which means sometimes, I mean, I think that 95% of machine learning projects can be well functioning and bring value to the end user without having a given algorithm that has a performance that's below a threshold. And that's why when you follow these kind of steps, you can deliver value, and maybe in the end, you aren't going to have a machine learning algorithm that's going to do like this kind of magic stuff that is predictive, and you're going to bring a lot of value just by structuring the data, giving insights with data analysts. But I think there are, I don't know, maybe 5%, 1% of use cases where you really do need an algorithm to perform sufficiently well in order for the product to be successful. For instance,
it's
so
very critical.
yeah, exactly. Like for instance, an example I like is like the face recognition on your iPhone. You cannot put in production a face recognition algorithm on your iPhone. That's not, I mean, almost 90.999% efficient. And so I think that's a challenge. That's a challenge you have to address. And I think this kind of way of working enables to address it. But you have to be aware when you address such a critical use case that there's a chance that even if you put 1,000 hours of work, you might not be able to make it work. And so that's why, as you say, sponsorship management and where Agile ways of working enables you to spot it. But at some point, you have to be clear about, okay, I'm not going to do it, and I have to stop.
Perfect.
Yeah. And you know, some costs are something that's very dangerous because you've invested so much money. You've done R&D, and so you're like, okay, it has to have some value, but sometimes you have to give up, and that's how.
Yeah, you have a very big research and innovation that goes quite deep into these very precise models.
Yes, exactly. I mean, these kind of use cases. So I'm not referring to the one I'm working on because most of the time, when we fail at making this kind of things work, it's because the data is either of too low quality, of too low quantity, or both of them sometimes. But yeah, sometimes, I mean, you have the good data, you have the good quality, but I mean, the algorithm isn't just good enough, and maybe state of the art isn't right there now. So you have to find another way, and you have to be handy creative.
Thank you. But really, you have another kind of company as well, more startup. Do you want to tell us a bit about how it's organized in your company?
Yes, with pleasure. So it's a sort of startup indeed. To give you some perspective, I joined Algolia 6 years ago. It was a 42% company, very nice and cozy. Now we're 800.
Oh wow!
So it's a startup that grew quite a little, but we still have a startup mindset in that there's a lot of ownership, there's a lot of ability to innovate as you do in each team that you're in, and each team organize themselves as they see fit. We have some shared tooling like Jira, we have some shared rituals like Company All Hands, but when I was working in a conversational natural language in a small team that built Algolia Answers and Algolia Understand, two natural language APIs, we built them in a team of 3, iterating with our own practices, building our own rituals. That was true all of the confinements as well, so it was quite a moment to be living in a small team with a lot of ownership. At that point, we did everything. I was handling Kubernetes deployments as well, because that's what it took for our service to be live and globally accessible.
So it was one team with all expertise in one team.
Yes, with pulling some help from, let's say, site reliability engineers that were shared across the company, to which I'm very grateful because I would not have managed any bit of Kubernetes myself without their help. We're not in the same position now. I'm working now in the Algolia Recommend team, which grew from an acquisition of Morpho, a Bucharest-based machine learning team that were working on recommender models. From the 6 people of that team, we're now 24 working in the Algolia Recommend product, because our company now is known and loved for a search engine, but is now a search and discovery platform, offering all-around solutions from the search to analyzing trends in your users, to recommending products or the next video to watch on our feed. We want to provide general tooling to help businesses satisfy their users and help them find what they could do with their service. And because this is very wide and open, we have to manage the projects to lower the uncertainty, but also to allow to dream big enough. And there is a middle ground to be found here. One thing you said about time boxing, I think is crucial, because I think we might not be on the same time duration for projects. I expect research projects at L'Oréal can be spanning months. Most of what we do is up to a month long, but sometimes we have initiatives that take longer. today we do have a team that is spread between machine learning, data scientists, and more MLOps and general engineering teammates, but we work in close unison because one needs the other, as simple as that. And that's where I think time boxing is useful also on the individual level. I have seen a few times in my team people getting into silos, as you say, having sunk costs that get, the more you invest, the more you think that this approach is the right one, and it's easy to get caught in something that might end up in a dead end. So having regular touch points within the team, as machine learning engineers in Algolia, we do have a global guild where we meet with other teammates from other teams, but weekly I also meet my own teammates in the recommend team to just discuss what each one has been working on, to make sure that nobody feels alone, gets lost into a direction that might not be fruitful. So I think time boxing is key, but also having everyone around the table. Like you said, we need to have people that buy in, that have the right level of expectations, and to have explicit success criteria so that you're not judged against always changing expectations.
Yeah, we're going to come back to the expectation problem. In terms of timing, and agile methods, it's sometimes you might have two roadmaps, a product roadmap and a model roadmap. These touch points that you're talking about, are these between these two roadmaps, or how do you navigate between
yes,
these two?
they're between the two. I think here also there's a middle ground to be found, because if the product is in the service of the tech, then you chase shiny new tech that might not actually be useful to your users. But if the tech is fully in the service of the product, you end up doing low bets and not realizing the value of what the state of the art can offer. So it needs to be a dance between the two, where one doesn't take too much of a lead. I think it's very valuable that you give time to data scientists and engineers to experiment. We do it with a monthly hackathon, the first Friday of the month, where we're taking time to work and try technologies, and this allows also to follow the state of the art and see value that you don't realize. On the other hand, we have a product-led perspective where we make sure that we meet the roadmap. This can evolve based on user needs, but ultimately this is what we are here for. Not experimenting with cool tech, but bringing value to our users.
Cool tech is fun. So we've been talking about these expectations that are especially high when we talk about AI and machine learning. We talked about the importance of having users on boards and sponsors. Can we deep dive a little bit more into that? Leo, would you tell us a bit more because we talked about starting simple, maybe they're rule-based, but your users and your sponsors are expecting big, shiny machine learning and AI. So how do you navigate that?
Communicate, train, and open the black box. I mean, that would be my big answer to that question. We are data scientists, ML engineers, etc. So we know the tech part that our users are hearing about the ChatGPT or GPT-4 since yesterday. So they want very, very shiny things. We are not OpenAI in every company. So by opening the black box, by explaining what are our model, where our model is good at, where our model is bad at, what are the good data to feed the model and to train the model, why some data are not relevant, because maybe you are generating wrong data and not clean data able to be trained. So communication could be, in my case, it's a very key point to keep our sponsor and our user to keep their satisfaction at the right level. And another point about that, as soon as the model is in production, has been deployed, as soon as you have reached a sufficient level of good prediction, I don't know whether you will start to create and to generate feedback from the user. And you have to manage and to create that new kind of management, how to manage the feedback, because people want to share their opinion, they want to share that in their specific case, the algorithm and the model was wrong or was very good. So you have to hear about that, like, I don't know, a YouTube comment section. You have to listen to them and you have to create maybe kind of a feedback lake. In my case,
Feedback lake?
Yes, we call it a feedback lake, like data lake, you know.
Yeah.
Big shiny word, but the idea is to tell your user that you have a place to put the feedback, your information, your remark about the model and the product. And behind that lake, we create kind of a tagging system to say, okay, that feedback goes in that place, this feedback are not relevant, that feedback is another section. And the idea is not to take one feedback after one feedback, but to deal with a pool of feedback, to integrate, exactly, and to integrate it in your product. And I think as soon as you have proved to your user that one feedback has been taken into account, your user are more comfortable and very trustful in what you're doing and what you have done for them and behind the product. So yeah, that's my point. That's my conclusion about that is that manage your feedback and prove to your user that you're taking into account your feedback, not all of them, but piece after piece you're taking them into account to improve the model. You're not the only people involved, all of them and everyone is involved in the project.
I like your feedback lake. We talked about users, there's also responses that needs to be, that have very high expectations. Victor, do you want to tell us about how do you deal with responses?
Yeah, that's a topic
Mm.
I know little about. Yeah, no, but I like what you said. I think there are two kinds of communication. So you have vertical one, which is how do you report and make information go up, and you receive some information from the sponsors for people. The vertical one and the horizontal one, you spoke very well about it. With so that means speaking with the users and also the developers and the data scientists. And yeah, regarding the sponsors, so I think it's quite a common problem actually in tech, which is sponsors are very solution oriented, which means that they hear about new tools that are very efficient into doing some jobs, and they are rational. They say, okay, why shouldn't it be used in my place? Why shouldn't it be useful for me? And I mean that's goodwill. But that's a mind of spirit that's very solution oriented, because as we said, you cannot be we speak about machine learning project, but maybe it's not a machine learning project. Maybe machine learning is not the technical break we're going to use. Maybe only an Excel file well done or Power BI can do the work, can bring 80%, 90% of value. So I think once you realize that it's a problem of mindset oriented towards solution rather than problem, understand how to answer it. You have to explain to your sponsors that it's good to be enthusiastic about solution, but first they are not very expert into that field, and that's their teams that are expert on that. And I think the second point is you have to show them that solving a problem is way more important and way more efficient. And I tend to think that I think most sponsors are rational, and they can understand that it's better to focus on a problem than just jumping onto a solution. And so, and I think that this kind of shift is possible. So you have to communicate, you have to educate them, but sponsors hate one thing: it's losing money. And so if you make them understand that focusing on the problem will make them earn money, and focusing on the solution will probably make them lose money, then they tend to be more reasonable. And so that I think that's the point. So first mindset shifting, and second one would be responsibilization of operational team that know the technology, and third is speaking the language of money.
Paul, do you want to add something to this conversation? Your product are a bit different. You might be facing comparisons with all the big players. And
we're facing a lot of comparison.
Yes.
And as you just said, Victor, we do have excited sponsors that see things and that say, okay, this is the future. Why am I not using it now? This, as you may know, is the Gartner usual hype curve. People are overhyped then they see the hard truth, then they are underhyped and they think there's no opportunity when there actually is, and now we can start talking. So I see our job here as helping the sponsors, the users, everyone really go through this as fast as we can, quickly. And in this current moment, it's the funniest job at all. It's speaking the hard truth. So when I see excited sponsors say, why don't we use GPT everywhere? I show them ChatGPT failing to understand. There's a funny example. You ask it, do we place windows near plants or plants near windows? And it says, oh, windows are placed near plants because they need light. But when you build the building, you usually build the windows before putting in the houseplants. And that's a clear example where language models have very good statistical prediction capability, but don't have any word modeling, and they just understand strings of tokens, but they have no common sense exactly. And I can tell you, the moment the marketing exec, who was super excited about having GPT write the press releases, realizes that GPT doesn't understand that plants are placed near windows, suddenly they're a lot more cautious about using this everywhere and without supervision. But then the other problem arises. When we go at the bottom, when people think, oh, there's nothing to be done in neural networks like it happened in the 90s, they are underhyped. And this is the moment where the hard truth they need to hear is where it actually works. But this is the interesting part of us as scientists. We can see some state-of-the-art technologies, we understand where it works and where it falls short, and we see there's the gap in the real-world understanding of this potential, which is where we can bring value, explaining the users what they could do that they don't dare dreaming of, and explaining the sponsors what we should wait just a little before putting in production.
Very interesting, very good, thank you. Okay, so we have 5 minutes left to go. Yeah, it went really, really fast. So, do you have one last thing that we haven't talked about that you would like to say, Sharone, before we move to a Q&A?
So, yes, actually. And I will jump on what you said about everything related to educating people. And even more, evangelizing everything that you're going to do. So make sure that when you put in place a model, you have explainability tools. Use package like SHAP, use Line, use whatever it takes. Put visuals, put schematically how the training is done, how prediction should be made, where in the space your clustering is going to happen, where your prediction set is going to be in this clustering, how it works, so that you have the same level of education as people around you, and you speak the same language. And I think this is key in every AI machine learning project.
I completely agree.
I don't know, but I completely, and I will emphasize what you say about explainability. We are in a time where we are facing very trending world about ChatGPT, about AI, and most of the people don't know that AI was created in the 50s just with internet and a very simple algorithm. And at that time it was AI. So I think that my first point is that we need to educate and to explain what is machine learning and what is AI, because people are misusing the word AI, and so they are creating by themselves some misconception and so unsatisfaction.
We would agree, it's a terrible word.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we should start every machine learning project by a presentation of what is AI and what is machine learning. We could lose many people, but we could keep the good one around the table. But yes, and I will just finish about the fact that a schema is always better than a word, so don't hesitate to put a schema, to put example, to put charts to explain your data, to explain your model. Always better than 20 or 30 slides to explain what you're doing. So don't hesitate to do that.
Thank you. Would you like to add something?
Yes, it's maybe a little thing, but remember open standards and existing technologies before chasing shiny new services. I think people like Hugging Face, OpenAI are doing something crazy right now, making available a lot of things that 5 years ago I wouldn't have thought I could have used myself, let alone build. On the other hand, I think this is a risk of us seeing the same things as the dot-com bubble, with big companies capturing a lot of value, starting to deepen a moat between them and the rest of the ecosystem. And if all of us have something to win by using a service like OpenAI's today, I think collectively we are all losing if in the next 10 years this is the only option and everyone has to pay an OpenAI tax to build products. So I would say word of caution, it's cool to find new tech. It's also long-term a good bet to create standards that we can all work together on.
Well, it was supposed to be open.
Yeah.
That was the original idea.
This is a fascinating topic, but maybe for another 1 hour long meetup about the ethics and politics of building technological services.
Yes. Victor, one last word.
Yeah, so two very quick last words. So
Sure.
the first is rebouncing on what you said. I think that part of the future, I mean, between 20 and 2020, we had a period of centralization of the web, which is kind of a problem, even if it brought so many functionalities to a lot of people with the GAFA basically. After Web 1, and so I think around Web 3 there is also this thing about more open source models and decentralizing this web and to make it better, more transparent, and more reliable for a lot of people. So that's the first one. The second one is I agree a lot about this explainability, and I think that's an ethic we have to hygiene, an ethic we need to force ourselves to have. Also because this kind of data we get to monitor our systems and explain to our sponsors how things are working are also a lot of information we can bring to our users in order to make them understand better how we do it. And it's always this little thing on Netflix where it tells you 90% of people like this, and that's why we showcase that to you. And I mean, it's important to have this kind of transparency to make people more savvy on that, and make them more aware of what's behind. So that I think that's a win-win, even for the people that conceive the software, but also for the people that are using it.
Yeah, completely. The trust and. All right, thank you very much. This was really good. We could go on forever, but we might have some questions to open the discussions. There's no questions at all. Sure.
A couple of years ago, data scientists on the topic industrialization and ML projects. A couple of years ago, there were two completely separate worlds. Data scientists didn't talk to developers at all. They didn't even use Git at the same time. That has evolved. But what are the big differences that you see that we still need to overcome?
I'm just going to rephrase for people who might not have understood. Years ago, the data scientists and the developers were not talking at all, and nowadays it's much better, but do we see still things to overcome to facilitate this interaction?
Maybe I can start and I can pass it to you. So for me, the biggest difference between now and then is that now we realize that we need developers everywhere. We need to be able to access the data. We need data that is clean. We need to put a new component in the tag to get a new data. So we need to talk to developers. And it's a win-win. So it happened that the more you work on data science and the more you want to build something that is complex, that covers a lot of use case, that is exhaustive to the company, and that brings the huge value that it can bring, you need developer. So the mindset changed totally in that sense. And that also, I think the skills of data scientists across different companies, it's very different. For some, it's machine learning engineer, for some, it's machine learning researcher, for others, it's MLOps. You cannot have all the hats. You cannot know how to deploy a Kubernetes pod, how to make sure that the cost is efficient, how to build something that is accurate enough. So if you don't work together, there's no way this project is going to end well.
So you say that data scientists have adapted to the engineers? Do you think engineers have adapted to the world of data scientists?
I'd be happy to take this one because as an engineer, I had to. I've been onboarding on my team people that were more data scientists than engineers over the previous years, and there's always a difference. We don't always speak the same language. I think coming from the academia, you have a different perspective than coming from the industry. It can boil down to simple things like calling variables with one letter and considering it readable. I think there's a lot of good development practices that we engineers need to teach to the data scientists. And there's a lot of good experiment, management, research practices that the data scientists can teach to those little engineers like I. And I've learned a lot over the last 2 to 3 years growing as a machine learning engineer from a general engineering perspective by learning from these people who had more vision than me on the research papers that exist, more skills on how to read a research paper even, more knowledge in, okay, you read this, but you know it won't be applicable in your case. I still struggle when I read theoretical papers. I think it could be applicable, and then with some help from someone else, I realized that, okay, you could, but it's 20x the cost of our current infrastructure, and there's no way this is worth it. So I think engineers can learn from the scientific practices of the data scientists, and the data scientists can learn from the engineering and operational principles that the engineers know. As you said, we know each other a lot more today than I guess it was 5 years ago. It's a bit like DevOps to me. 10 years ago, no dev did operational, and no operational engineer did dev, and now a lot do a bit of both, but they still have a lot to learn from each other's side.
I will add one thing on my side, so I agree with you, and I saw the trend that data scientists and DevOps, DataOps, and software engineering were closer and closer year after year. But there is one thing that should not be forget in a team, a data science team, is someone who knows the business and can translate what the user wants to the tech and to the engineer. So we are many engineers around the table, but we need to not forget that part of a team and not to be focused on the new trend tech part of the new paper, the new interface model, and we need to keep focused on business. We are here for business, and we need to have product manager with us to build the product. We should not forget that part of the team.
And actually, if I might complement what you said, I mean, I think as a product manager, my role is not really to be the business representative along the team, or within the team. It's more to make the engineers in the teams good at business and knowledgeable about business, because in the end, when you bottleneck the knowledge about whether it is between developers, data scientists, and business, or between business and developers, data scientists, there's inefficiency. So we are all really better at what we do if our engineers are very well knowing about business and they're able to understand what they are bringing value to the end customer.
Someone talked about agility and Scrum as well, and I would like to know how in your different companies do you handle this Scrum approach, because for me, I'm not really happy with the Scrum, the usual Scrum by the book that is often imposed from the hierarchy to align everybody on the same principles. So did you put in place specific adjustments to Scrum specific for data science?
I'm just going to rephrase, just in case people did not hear, especially online. Scrum is hard to implement around data science, and do you make any adjustments to it, Kanban?
So I will talk about myself and about my team. So we are using Scrum, but we are not using Scrum by the book. Scrum by the book has its limitation, and in our case, so we are dealing with 2 big sprints and the basic whole meetings, so daily, sprint reviews, sprint planning, etc. It was quite hard at the beginning to to organize ourselves between that very software development practice. But at the end today, just to give you an illustration on how we process at Servier in my team, most of our engineers or MLOps, data engineer, are dealing with a classical, I would say, Scrum process. But for data scientists and machine learning research, we are getting for each sprint a dedicated time just for research and innovation. We know that the sprint is, I don't know, 40 days long. We have 4 days dedicated to research and improvement, just to test things, to find new ideas, to read paper, I don't know. So it's agile, but not at all. Just to continue creating innovation. It's important, and I think Scrum by the book is a bit limiting innovation.
To give you another perspective, but which goes along with you, I have no idea what Scrum by the book is because I never worked with it. I worked in agile methodologies since I left school, but they never really structured around specific book, needs of Scrum or Kanban. The way we do it today in my team, it's 2-week sprints on which we take from a backlog to create a sprint based on estimates of tasks. But not all tasks have end dates, not even estimates today in our team. Sometimes it's blurry. But we try to adjust, so some sprints will be a lot of delivery, some sprints will be more handling maintenance, addressing bug fixes. This can go from a sprint to another, be very different. We keep the same rough rituals, meet every 2 weeks for this, have a daily where we discuss the current task at hand, but sometimes a task can take a few days or can be closed in an afternoon. I think what's good with agile methodologies is that it helps you focus on what is important, which is creating value and making sure you do it in a recurrent, understandable, predictable manner. The moment we focus more on the agile ritual than on the value we create, I think is the moment where Scrum by the book would be dangerous. But I think everyone in this room agrees that following a model helps to some extent, and that we still should be critical thinking of what the system brings to us. It's true for Scrum, it's true for OKRs, it's true for any management method. You need, I think, regularly to revisit and think, is it working for me? Does it bring more value than not? Am I just filling boxes because I have to?
So I can share 2 visions. So 4 years ago, I was working at Dailymotion, 3 years ago actually, and now I'm at Contentsquare, and the way of working is totally different. So at Dailymotion, it was very Scrum, totally Scrum. So sprints, dailies, sprint planning, everything that you said, and yeah, sometimes the tickets were in the backlog or in the sprint were just going over one sprint, another sprint, and then you rename it because you need to close it, because you need to make sure that it's closed. And yes, Scrum by the book doesn't work, for sure. So at Contentsquare, it's a lot different. We use Kanban in Jira. And we are not limiting ourselves to sprints. We create tasks that we think are well splitted and splitted the most possible. So one task is really one task. It's not a huge set of tasks that you need to do. And when you create the task, so you put an end date to this task when you create it, and the way we work at Contentsquare is what's called the Rhino methodology. So you work with trio: product, tech, and design. So every project has this trio. And what you do is that when you map the roadmap high level and roadmap low level, you make sure that what you built answers one North Stars metric, translate to one KPI in this agile methodology, but you are not sticking yourself to 2 weeks of work, one ticket close, and stuff like that.
How did you say the method?
Rhino methodology. So this is a private truck, Rhino, R-H-I-N-O. So when Contentsquare was valued more than 1 billion, it was a licorne. And when it arrives at 2 million, it was a rhino because it has two. So this is why it's rhino.
Less rare.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what was said. Maybe of my experience, one of the limitations of Scrum I saw was that the concept of sprint, in a way, makes you tend to deploy to production at the end of the sprint, at the end of the 2 weeks, because basically you want to finish all the tickets of the sprint, and you have this kind of quite rational, very human reasoning, which is there are going to be scales, economies of scale, if I just ship more tickets at the same time instead of doing little deployments, and that's very anti-DevOps as a mentality. But yeah, as you work in batch of 2 weeks, you tend to do that. So what I like now is just try to ship everything to production. So maybe not, maybe having some kind of blue-green functioning where you can deploy to production without having it shipped to users. So you can just safely deploy without impacting everything. But I do like this, and I think it's way more efficient. And one thing I like about Scrum, when I compare it with Kanban, for less mature teams, is that you have this retrospective every 2 weeks, 3 weeks or 1 week, depending on what you do. And I think that's an important thing in order to get a continuous improvement mindset. I think teams that are skilled and mature are able to do that with other methodologies, but that's one point of Scrum that I wouldn't give up or wouldn't give away.
Okay, yes. So we're supposed to be done, but I think we can have one more, right? Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so my question is about agile methodology. You talked about sprints, and do you have like a target and a goal that the team have to achieve by the end of the sprint, or is it just like a set of tasks? This is the first part of the question, and the second is, do you use the story point estimation? If not, why? If yes, why? Thanks.
So to the second answer, we use story points, but we need to get better at estimating them. So right now we use them as an exercise, but we don't take it. It informs decisions, but we won't do a hard cut because this was too big or too small. At some point we will do that. But sorry, can you rephrase your first part?
Yeah, the first part is about the sprint.
Yes, we don't have specific goals for the team. We use the sprint at Algolia in my team for separating duration of work and to do retrospectives every 2 sprints to discuss what went well and what didn't. But some projects will span across a few sprints, and some individual developers will do a lot in a single sprint. So in my case, no specific goal. But I know some teams, they give names to sprints, so maybe they do.
There's no systematic release after the sprint. So
No, and that's indeed what you said, Victor. It feels wrong to me. Like it's so anti-DevOps. Every time I finish a feature, it's deployed, and if it's not, it's the deployment that needs to be worked on at the next sprint.
In my case, we are trying to define objective for each of our sprints. Quite difficult every time, but by trying to define this objective is to have the same north line for every people in the team and not creating silos between the engineer, data analyst, etc. So just by trying to have the same target for that sprint could help us to say, okay, let's do that together. And on the other point about story point, yes, we have to be better in estimating, but I like the exercise of evaluating story points because every developer in the team is on the table, can talk about the task, can say, in my case, it's a 1, in my case, it's a 10, okay, let's discuss. And at the end, maybe it's 8, it's 7, whatever, but people have talked and people
it's a good way
know
to see if we're
exactly.
aligned or not.
That's just, for me, just the objective of the story point exercise.
Yeah, so on the goals, I think it's a good exercise, but one point of attention I saw back in a few years ago is that it tends you to focus a lot on the features you want to develop, and so be very oriented toward the solution you want to build and not the problem you're solving. So I think that's a good thing to do, whether it is on a 3-month basis or just for a sprint, but make sure it's business oriented, so you speak the language of business, and it's problem oriented and not just I want to build this interface, these features. About story points, yeah, I do agree. I don't like them a lot because they tend to be understood as a contract that the developers make with the sponsors, but they can be twisted into that. So we have to be careful. I think that's a good way, a good exercise. If we try to use it in order to make smaller tasks and split as many as possible as we can, in order to have smaller features, smaller tasks, because the smaller the better.
Okay. It's 8 o'clock. No more questions? Are we ready for food and drinks? Yes, I think we are. Right, we can continue the discussions through food and drinks.